How you doing, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Yourself?
I'm great. First of all, I want to thank you for doing this. It's an honor. You've been a big inspiration to me for many years, and I also want to thank Frontiers Music for setting this up for us. The first question I really want to get into is your background. So, how did you end up from Denmark to New York City? And
Yeah, I mean, there's a few steps in between that, but I think that I think everything starts with a little bit of a goal you set for yourself, and along the way, somehow that goal might be made a little bigger and further away, but that doesn't matter if that's where you want to go. And I mean, I got into rock and roll, or I got into music at age 15 and a half, direct into a band. I mean, direct into a professional band that were 10 years older than me, already had a record deal and stuff like that. And, of course, now hindsight is 2020. And when I look back, I was far from ready for what I went into.
yeah,
Far from, I mean, in every which way, I wasn't matured. I didn't have necessarily a natural talent that just said, okay, man, just, show me a few chords and then, we're ready to go. But one thing for sure, that was that as I walked in to this house, which would be my home for the next 4 years, um, I committed 100%. I left school, told my mom I'm not coming back, or I sort of asked my mom, but I think in reality, she just thought that, this might be one of the better options for me,
right.
and so like I says, as soon as I got on board, that's what we were doing 24/7. We were a professional band. We were living together. We had one thing in mind, and that is to succeed like our heroes and that stuff. And after a few albums in Denmark, we ended up going to Spain and living for a couple of years. And I had bit by bit, of course, naturally gotten a bit older. And I would start, contributing a lot, and I was also start raising my voice a lot, and start writing more and more songs, and at the same time, completely falling in love with American hard rock that had been slowly introduced to me. Van Halen, Eddie Money, Cheap Trick, Journey, Kansas, all the good '70s stuff.
Yeah.
Great melodies, great singers, etc., etc. Um, so I think that once I heard that sound, I mean, of course, back in Denmark, when I walked in, just to clarify it, I mean, they were already serious rock fans and had massive collection of, Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, Bad Company, Status Quo, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Jethro Tull, Black Sabbath, Zeppelin, Beatles, Stones, the foundation of rock and roll. So, but the sound of American rock coming in it just had a different sound, very melodic and not so much screaming. I mean, and I completely fell in love with that. And I could see that my songwriting wanted to go that. Even when I was just sitting with the guitar and stuff like that, it wanted to go there. And in the beginning of 1982, we meet an American in Madrid who comes to a show. I don't think he really was meaning to come show, but after that we talk. He just starts, well, I can be your manager. Come to New York. You can live in my house. And I didn't really need to hear anything else. And we just gathered up anything we could sell, any money we got up. And in the summer of 1982, we went to New York.
Nice.
And started playing the clubs, and then if you go back to, I'm sure you're aware of what I'm saying. Go back to 1982, turn on MTV. It has just started.
Yeah.
Pyromania has just been released. I mean, sort of,
Rush.
the whole sound of all that stuff. And everything was on fire. And, even as a Danish band called Lion at that time, we got into to playing a lot of the New York clubs, and that was the first time I discovered how it was to play in front of a rock crowd that sort of was with the band,
Yeah.
that actually supported what the band stood for. So, I mean, I fell in love. I was married. I committed my life for that, and it would never ever change since that day.
As far as the songwriting process, you said you got into songwriting on your own, and I know you had to mature, obviously, through time. When do you really feel that that became something that you're, good at? What is your creative process and writing? What are you influenced by? What are you inspired by? Is it personal experiences that you grab this from, or is it just things that you see in everyday life?
Well, obviously, there's when you talk about writing a song, I mean, there's the musical and the musical aspect of it. There's a melody, and then there's the lyrical content.
Yeah.
And in most of my career, with all my albums, I've always done the lyrics when I was completely happy with the song and the melody. I've just been singing something like that, and maybe a few words stuck and stuff like that. So and so, and then the words come. But just to go back, sort of, what inspires you. I don't know really if ever I have sat down and been inspired by something to do something, because that would mean that the first thing that I do is sort of relates to something that I maybe heard and stuff like that. I mean, it would be different as in poetry or as a lyricist, where if you only think about the lyrics and you were walking down the street or you were in the park, and a moment, you caught your eyes and stuff like that, and you took that home with you and you wanted to tell that story lyrical wise. But I've rarely been inspired, musically, except for just being in music and just feeling the electric force field just going through me and being driven by that. So whenever I would pick up a guitar, the first chord I would play would be start writing a song. Everybody else that I played with are the classic, guitar players or stuff like that in the guitar shop, that they start by playing, Walk This Way or Led Zeppelin, stuff like that. I've never in my life played someone else's song. And I'm not necessarily a guitar player and stuff like that, but I'm a songwriter. And so the first chord, the first thing that I do is instantly starts the beginning of a song, and it could go anywhere. It could go anywhere. So there really isn't a pattern that you can lean up against in that way, which is also why I think, of course, all the songs in White Lion I co-wrote with Vito Bratta, and him and I would be sitting in front of each other, feeding off each other. And it could be, I come from a folk background, so I've always been a campfire, kind of guitar player. So I saw this, so I'm able to instantly sing a melody and play a song without having the major guitar riff going, all that stuff. So I can play any song, just sit down. I can play any White Line song, just in the simple form. So if I sort of just had something instantly, Vito would listen and and then he would start that. Or, for example, you were mentioning weight. The second Vito started doing the first three chords, I sang wait.
Yeah.
I had no idea why I sang that, but I knew from that second on that once I'd established that word, there was no way I would be able to get away from it. I would have to write the song about that. It's simply just, a love song, on the outside or on the way in or stuff like that. A simple Beatle kind of a lyric that that has just made you to feel good. And it's not supposed to make you think too much. Now, Lady of the Valley, All the Fallen Men, El Salvador, Broken Home. Now you're diving into completely different stories, and that's done on purpose. Little Fighter. Those are the lyrics that that I knew of the songs that I wanted to write. Once I started writing Wait, it was sort of like Lego blocks. You just sort of built on top of it. There wasn't really a lot of places I could go with a song like that, with a lyric like that, and every album and needs songs like that.
Yeah, especially back then, because that was, I think, really what broke you guys into the whole.
No, no, yeah. I mean, this is a classic radio rock song, timeless. It doesn't necessarily spell 80s when you hear the song, especially in the re-recording where now my vocal range lies sort of in what many people would say in a little bit more comfortable thing. Of course, when you were 15, 16-year-old rock fan and Wade is on the radio and everything is like that, that's a different story. But now today, when you talk about the songs, in my case, it doesn't go like that for every single band. But for me, I feel that, now with those two re-recording of the songs of White Line albums, that the songs have just been given, another 100 years of listen,
If you were to have it on your tombstone, what song would you consider your top one? Maybe, or the one
Well, I
that
mean,
was a songwriter.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people that now sort of are discovering me are not all aware that I have 14 solo albums. So you could only imagine that once I started writing my first solo album and continued, that would be my legacy. That would be the story of Mike Tramp's life, traveling through life. Those are the real songs in that way. When it comes to White Line, which is a band that existed in the 80s, dealing with sometimes caught in the middle of being an 80s image band, but wanting to go somewhere else with the music. Having a background from growing up in Denmark, a little country, and then growing up in the 60s and seeing the Vietnam War from a different angle, seeing the world from a different angle that Americans would see it and stuff like that. I was very, very aware of issues, no matter if I took part of it as a young man or stuff like that. But when it came to put pen to paper, I always felt that I wanted to sort of unconsciously wanted to write something that I would be proud of 40 years later and that I could show my children and would not be oh man, Daddy, are you the one that's singing about, locking the cellar door and talking dirty to someone, no, that's not Daddy. That's someone else, so I'm of course I'm saying that with a smirk, I'm just explaining what I chose. And it wasn't necessarily that I thought that I was going to sit down there and be political. It just came natural for me that I couldn't write, that other kind of stuff. I wasn't very good at, tits and ass kind of songs.
That's awesome.
The few times that I've sort of gotten close in the lyrics, stuff like that, but it wouldn't be something that I would return to.
Right. Yeah. So that wasn't really your thing. That's awesome, though.
And that's just natural. And I mean, I could only say, well, I mean, I mentioned this in every interview because I like to tell the truth. And, I mean, I molded myself a lot around, David Lee Roth, but it was all about his stage persona, visual wise. But I had nothing in common with him lyrical wise or voice wise or melody wise and stuff like that. Prior to that, of course, I'd grown up with my ultimate hero, Freddie Mercury, and so on. So
Good inspiration to have.
I would say exactly. I was a young man. Trying to find his identity or where he would be. And it's not the world's greatest story, but when I'm sitting there writing Lady of the Valley,
Yeah.
He's sitting there with a yellow legal pad at my manager's kitchen table and always being late with the lyrics and stuff like that. Two songs come into my mind. One was from Queen called Lily of the Valley, and another one from Rainbow with Ronnie James Dio called Lady of the Lake. So I don't know. I mean, they're just in here. It just becomes Lady of the Valley. Once I had Lady of the Valley, I started telling the story of the man coming out there, after the loss of his brother. I mean, it could be a fantasy, it could be medieval, it could be whatever, but he's bringing, you know, i- his fallen brother to the lady of the valley or what, I mean, it's my own little Lord of the Rings kind of thing there.
So do you approach writing music kind of like storytelling?
It definitely started that from once I did my soul albums, because the thing was also, regardless of what, not regardless, but even though I've just sort of said it to you, when I'm in a band, which I've been 3 times, um, I do feel that I'm representing the band.
Yeah.
So me, myself, and I is in many ways a third person, which we don't know his name or her name. Once I'm Mike Tramp on 14 solo albums, I am the character.
You feel like you found your own voice with your own solo work?
Yeah, because in a band, even though I started White Lion with Vito, and we were the sound of the band, you are a member.
Yeah.
You are a part of a machine. When it comes to writing my solo songs and my solo albums, I'm just being me. It just wants to come out, and I just let it out. My sadness, I mean, I prefer to write sort of in more melancholy, is sad than all happy and party and stuff like that. It's not something that I'm very strong at being necessarily. If I'm positive, it's probably more from a fallen kind of view that well, I'm gonna get back up and fight further and so on. So it comes from different angles.
Yeah. So how do you balance your artistic creativity a lot, with being in, a project or in a machine or like White Lion, for example, the image and everything. How do you balance your true creativity with trying to represent the band as well? Like back in the '80s, I don't know if you guys really fit into kind of like a mold, like some of them, some of the older bands, like for example, like Poison or um, guys
Yeah.
like that all kind of jumped on a bandwagon, which I don't think you guys did. I think you stayed pretty much true to what you guys did. You just made good rock and roll and just good music and it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it was beautiful.
Well, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and sort of just to go back, even though we might have thought about it, and even though we might have wished for it, it was it was a little bit tough taking a stand in the middle of the 80s when you were aiming for success. You were watching all the other bands. You just mentioned Poison. You got to mention Motley Crue. You got to mention whatever other bands we had toured with and stuff like that. Um, the 80s was such an energetic and such a positive time that it made it a little hard sometimes to take a stand against it. There were many times, and I'm sure many other bands, regardless if they never spoke about it, would say that there were times that we were tired of had gotten caught up in what the 80s sort of became, in the end, sort of like a copy of itself, because suddenly there were 5 million bands with a blonde lead singer and 3 guys with black hair, and it was tough to really know what was what, and every band was called something about a color or an animal or things like that. So I can't go back and say, well, we knew it all,
Right.
because we also wanted to be on the train that was going to wherever that was going.
Yeah.
We it was impossible to go against the grain. Vito and I knew that we wanted to take the music, and obviously we did take the music, but we also sometimes struggled a little with maybe finding the place where we should be success wise, But in the long run, looking back now, haven't done Lady of the Valley, haven't done Little Fighter, Broken Home, and now Lights and Thunder in El Salvador. It became the late bloomer that now I can lean up against that and say, I'm proud that you can sit there and say that White Lion had its own identity, even though in Circus Magazine, sometimes it was hard to differ between Vince Neil and Mike Tramp and Bret Michaels because everybody was sort of in reality almost looking the same. But when you take the vinyl on or the CD and you put it on the turntable, you don't see the close, you don't see the hair, you hear the music, and there White Lion has its own place, and you can't compare it to the two bands I just mentioned.
What do you think? What do you think the music industry is lacking right now with the younger generation? Yeah,
Oh, yo. I was just talking to my daughter. She's 18. She's self-taught, plays guitar, sings, play piano, writes songs and stuff like that, but hasn't necessarily chosen to follow a career in music. And I'm, of course, also telling her that she shouldn't, because, in that way, I wouldn't know. I simply wouldn't know. There's no trace left of how it was when we would go up to a record company, a big record company, that in our case, Atlantic Records, which were in the same building as Warner Brothers and Elektra Records, which together creates WEA. And the money and the factory and the power and the big videos and the tour support and stuff like that. I mean, it's not our wish, but most bands are recording their albums sort of at home or in multiple places, between the musicians. There ain't no budget for it anymore. But at the same time, there are also no record stores.
right.
I mean, it's 50, 60, 70% online, and, after the show, Mike Tramp come out and, you sign the CDs or the vinyl that people buying after the show. So, I mean, it'd be impossible to even comment on it because it's non-existing. You can't, I mean, because I can't talk about what goes on in Taylor Swift world or, or that kind of stuff that huge kind of things. I mean, that's just business. It doesn't have anything to do with how it was for us.
I don't think it has anything to do with these days. I don't think it has anything to do with talent either.
No. Everything has changed. Everything has changed, but also the audience has also changed. The audience want it delivered in a different way. A person with a smartphone, age 14 to 17, I mean, has an attention span of like
seconds. Yeah, my daughter's the same way. I have a teen daughter, and she's the same way.
we represent the classics now. We're like a zoo where you go to see almost an extinct animal. I mean, you come to the clubs, you come to the small theaters, and you see the bands that were from that time period, and you just get that last breath of live rock and roll. In that way. And the thing is, just I can't fight that, and I'm not going to fight that. And with all those changes, I have adapted. I've improvised to find my space in that world. I don't fill my plate with more than I can eat. I don't go out, thinking I'm playing for 24,000 people when I'm playing for 55 people. Everything is now being, sort of, scaled to what you're going to do. The only thing where I don't compromise is the quality of the songs I write and the music that I produce.
True.
Compromise cannot be made there. And there will be a time in the very near future where I 100% will just release my own music. And it's just going to be that way. My music today is an expression of where I am in life and what I want to say and things like that. I'm not going to write an album if it doesn't want me to write an album. I don't sit down and force a
Right.
song out because I have a contract with a record company that says I need to write a song. Those days are gone. So the music that I produce, my solo albums and so, comes 100% from the heart and soul. It is something that wants to get out, and I capture it and I call it an album and I put it out. And maybe there's 1,000 people that this album is made for, but it's still my music. When I was a young man, and and I was walking through my neighborhood, and I see a painter sitting sort of like in a little bit of a basement with windows and stuff like that, and he sees me looking at what he's doing. So he says, "Come down," and I'm going, "Wow, man, what a great painting! How much does something like that cost?" And he says, "It's not for sale." And I go, "Well, why are you painting?" "Because I love it."
That's the difference between a lot of the musicians from that era, um, to guys like yourself that are still continuing to do this. That you're doing it for the love of it, and for the because it's in your blood, and you do it for that reason.
It's what we are. I mean,
Yeah,
we don't
you
we
are.
don't put on a uniform and go to work. I mean, whatever I do as Mike Tramp, the person that I am, the you know, uh, maybe in reality that was one of the things that when you look back, and I don't want to keep looking back and dissing myself and stuff like that, because a lot of what happened back then was a search for finding yourself. But these days, when you walk up on stage, you walk up there as you,
Yeah.
and you are just you. And I'm not just going to use the word fans, but they're the people that come to hear the music and see the shows. They like this. They like that they can feel the person on stage, that they feel they know
Mhm.
the person from the way, in my case, I express myself with the things I say between the songs. It kind of shows my character of
Yeah.
who I am as a person.
Do you tour a lot still these days?
We're just about to start a 2 month US tour.
Right. And you said that you just came out with a re-release of some of the White Lion songs, which I'm definitely looking forward to checking that
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
But what is the difference between the recording now than what it was originally?
The thing is, to make a very, very long story a little shorter to fit into this program here, um, I never had a plan of doing these two songs of Wide Line albums that have come within the last, 2.5 years. The second one is coming out now, August 23rd. Um, but I had a I had a label on me that said I was in White Lion, or I was from White Lion, or I was the voice from White Lion, and that thing chased me
You think-
everywhere I went with my 14 solo albums.
Yeah. Yeah.
Half of the posters for the shows would say Mike Tram, voice of White Lion, and it would give people a sense, if they weren't well informed, that I was going to play White Lion songs, and I wasn't. And then bit by bit, I got pulled into it, and then I started, because I was touring just as a solo artist, with an acoustic guitar and Cesar, and then some of the White Lion songs, snuck and found its way in there, and people liked it, and people liked the story behind them, and I at times enjoyed it, but it was really not what I'd planned to do.
Yeah.
And then it sort of just, one thing led to another. I just says, man, if I keep hearing this White Lion and things, stuff like that, I need to make it sound today. We're gonna stay as close to the songs as possible. But when I walk out on stage, it's not gonna be the same person who walked out on stage in '88. I
That's
want the songs to have a form of maturity, a form of aging, like a bottle of wine that has just been given the time, and I want that to shine through in the songs. And a lot of people who maybe have had a big hiatus from the original White Lion recordings, that's the feeling they get now from that of how modern is not the word, because rock and roll cannot be modern, but how today it feels that you don't feel, oh, I'm listening to an old, like something for, from there. It
Right.
sounds like the songs has its strength, that they sound like they belong today, and where my voice is, feels like this. You really, you believe the singer, you believe the story being told.
Are you recording yourself or through a label, through Frontiers Music, for
Yeah,
example?
no, those two albums on Frontiers.
Right, right. So they do they set up the recording process for you and everything. Is that
No, I know, no, I produce a record all in house
oh,
with
that's
the
great.
band and the studio, and they get the final thing. Nobody has anything to say when it comes to the music and stuff like that. I mean, that's already those songs I wrote with Vito Brade, like I said, 41 to 35 years ago. So now it's just a matter of going in and how I want to present them today.
How do you feel about the recording process today? That's
Well,
more
I mean,
analog.
if there's one thing that I've done, it's been in a studio. So, I mean, everybody that we work with, we are all so much more involved in the recording process, because, like I said, in the old days, we walked into the studio and maybe we were in the studio for a month and a half, and the record company was paying the bill both for the food and the studio, and
Yeah.
then it would be mixed. you
Mm.
know, Today we go in, maybe 3, 4 days, and we knock out the basic tracks, and then I do the vocals at home, and we add maybe some keyboards and do some guitar repairs and stuff like that, and then you mix.
Yeah. How do you keep your voice in shape after all this time? Uh,
Yeah, well, it's not. I don't know if I really keep it in shape. The thing is that I don't sing anything that I can't.
that's smart.
I don't have a goal that, even though I sang very, very high when I was younger and stuff like that, it was also not the plan. It just happened. Okay. It just happened. Um, but my voice would gradually change a little through the 4 White Line albums. And after White Line, I had a band called Freak of Nature, which became really sort of like much more heavier, and
Yeah.
and I could feel where my voice was there. And then once I started doing the solo album, I knew that the voice was going to be the sound of my heart and soul. So I just needed to sing as me. When you sing in a rock band, you are in there, battling with some big guitars and drums. And the second you start and sit and write these songs for your own project, and find how you want to tell some of those stories, you're not starting screaming. If I sit in the sofa or if I sit at the piano and stuff like that, I want it to be sounding like I'm sitting there. It has to feel like that. That's the honest me right there.
And melody, is very important, I
Well,
think.
melody is something that comes instantly. I mean, it doesn't take me very long to write a song,
Right.
and I will not struggle with it. It will tell me very quickly if I start on an idea, if I can finish it.
Mm.
I mean, it's just one of those things. So because I don't have a contract with somebody delivering something for, I'm not under any pressure that I have to finish something, that doesn't feel right.
So you
I just
let it flow, right?
like I said a couple of times, but it just feels like it's an extension of my hands. And it just feels like it's some coming out. I haven't even thought about it. I have no musical training. I have no musical theory or whatever stuff like that. My ears is 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 my judgment.
That's
Of course I understand what chords and what notes work on top of other stuff, through time. but I don't sit down there like a mathematician and try to, work out chords that should overlap these because it looks good, but you don't know how it sounds. Because when I strum a guitar and I sing instantly, I know how it sounds.
Some of the best songs were written with three chords.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Most of the big songs we wrote have been written within, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And nowadays, I mean, for example, for like me, I went to Musicians Institute out of Hollywood, California. And when I approach writing a song, I can't get out of the thought process of thinking music theory, like,
Yeah.
how technical can I make it? How complicated can I make it? And that frustrates me because I think that limits me on my songwriting ability.
Yeah, of course it does, because I will honestly say, regardless, there might be a lot of people out there trying to, what the fuck is he saying? You cannot teach someone to write a song. There's no what if I told you to write, you go, start with a G, go to a B minor, and then go to an A, and then go to D. Well, now I've just told you to do something, that's just four chords. Now, okay, what's the melody going to do during that? I mean, so uh, you could be singing a completely different melody that I would be over those chords, and things like that. So writing songs, you can't. Nobody can teach anybody to write a song. Different way. I mean, a guitar player that wants to write a metal song or something, like would start, and they'll start doing something, but still, everything the person does, they sort of are building and building and building. They're not starting with a template and so on. So,
Still pretty much follows the song structure, though, with the
Well,
verse.
once, I mean, like I said early on, when Vito started playing the beginning to wait, and I sang wait, I knew, and he knew where the next melody was going or where the chord change would go. That just sort of spoke to itself.
How do you feel about the industry today, as far as with AI being kind of incorporated into it? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, again, it's like the smartphones. I mean, if I could say, if I could say, like, I would like to live in a place where I could exist and function and everything around me could function without the internet, that's where I would be. I have, it's great that you and I are sitting doing this. It's great that my guitar player in Los Angeles can send me a WAV file and I can import it into my, recording session. I understand, and it's great that we can send rockets to space, so we can get more streaming channels and whatever it is. All that stuff I understand, and we take advantage of the technology. But all this, with asking a robot that has the information from 1 billion songs to write something, I don't know. It just goes against my religion. It just goes against everything, stuff like that. Why? If I would have to lean on that, well, in my opinion, that tells me that I'm done and dusted. I'm done. And
That's
so and so, I mean, it's
lazy,
we don't
right?
we don't even need to use the word cheating and stuff like that.
It's just
Um, it
lazy.
will not appeal. It will not appeal. I mean, Iron Maiden are not going to use AI to write a new song, because that they have their formula. ACDC has their formula. Robert Plant has his formula, and so, and but there are some of those modern hit songwriters that say, well, within 35 seconds the chorus have to come, that decides that the songs have to, they have to have one word, because one word is stronger than another word. I mean, that kind of bullshit. And but you know what? I don't hang out with those kind of people.
Right.
There's space for everyone in the world. The world is a big place. In Denmark, I live on my own farm. It's pretty much away from everyone else. I sort of can can be in my own little world and stuff like that. So I just choose. I don't go to see a film I don't want to see. I don't go see a sports team that I don't like. I just do what I like. So I'm really not that bothered with all this other stuff. It's so and so. Sign
Unfortunately.
of the
Let's end this off with do you have any advice for aspiring musicians these days, considering the change in the industry or whatever? What do you think they're lacking? For example, I think that it's experience. A lot of these younger guys are lacking the experience because they sit in the room and they can play like a million miles an hour, perfect guitar, but they're sitting on in their bedroom on YouTube. You know what I mean?
In 1981, I asked Dave Lee Roth when I met him in Madrid, Spain, what it would take for me to break in America. And he says, you got to go there and play the clubs for at least 10 years. I mean, this thing about music, it started with live performance.
Yeah.
I mean, all the legendary bands, including the bands that's on your T-shirt, et cetera, they started in bars. They started playing in clubs and just banging out, and down the line, suddenly came the record deal. So for most musicians or artists, that's part of sort of the foundation that maybe were 50s, 60s, 70s, and then let's include the 80s. They all came from a live band. None of them were created. And then it says you got to learn how to play an instrument, and then we put you on tour. Everybody started in clubs, and record company would go out in clubs and seeing the bands. Yeah. That will never happen again. They'll never happen again. Now young bands have to pay to play. And so sort of like the whole it's kind of like the horse has been put behind the cart, and everybody's really confused because the horse in reality doesn't want to push the cart because it's a horse. It's a stupid metaphor, and now, but the thing is just, I don't have any advice for any musicians, or young artists. I think they should just follow what makes sense to them, because I can't give any advice regarding signing record deals because I don't know who signs record deals anymore. The few people who sign a record deal, not just you sign a record deal, you have to give away your merchandise, you have to give away your publishing, and you have to give away your firstborn and et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, everything has just changed, and with all those things, the soul in the music, the core of everything, the song, the music, and the message, it's just gone.
Thank you, Mike.
You got it, brother.
All right, God bless you, man, and
Likewise.
fuck, man, take care.
I'll see you, bro.